Hagar, we're very fortunate to have you on this morning for many reasons, but coming into the newsroom just now, the IDF is confirming that Israeli forces carried out airstrikes in Gaza. They claim it's in response to what Israel says was anti-tank missiles and gunfire towards IDF troops. Hagar, I know you're learning this at the same time we are. What does this information mean for this deal?
You know, I'm not really surprised by this. To be honest with you, it's to be expected. I've overseen a lot of ceasefires in my time in foreign policy, and you never expect that both parties are just gonna that the guns are gonna go silent the next day, and that you're never gonna hear them again. It's just not how it works. You've got two sides, as with any war, that deeply mistrust each other, and as a result, of course, this is going to happen. But to be honest with you, I've always expected, and I'm not trying to sound biased in it, but like I said, I've overseen many wars and ceasefires, particularly in this conflict. And Hamas always violates the ceasefire. It's always what they do, just as Hezbollah repeatedly violates the ceasefire in Lebanon. And I always use that as an example, by the way, because that ceasefire still holds. But the reason it still holds, even with the violations, is Israel's response is very precise, very targeted. Again, they have a partner in Lebanon, unlike Gaza. But that said, I would expect flare-ups of this kind. Sometimes there'll just be clashes, certain strikes. But again, it doesn't mean that the whole thing unravels.
Thank you so much for that. We were also taking a live look at Gaza a moment ago. The UN is reporting difficulty getting aid into Gaza due to closures and other restrictions. I spoke with a UNICEF worker, Tess Ingram. She had this to say about reopening crossings.
We need the restrictions that have been placed on the types and the volume of aid coming into the Gaza Strip to be lifted by the Israeli authorities. We need the crossings that are closed to be reopened. And we need some of the, I would say, impediments that have been placed on us to be lifted. For example, we need to access the crossings more frequently without restrictions on when and where we can pick up aid.
With that said, in the last few hours, Netanyahu says he's keeping the Rafah crossing closed, something aid organizations have said they desperately need. Do you think aid is becoming politicized, or is that the right move to get the hostages, the remaining hostages, returned?
No, well, so listen, in this phase, the question of aid is, well, first of all, when it comes to the question of aid, you can barely believe anything from anywhere, because the fact is that it's very actually hard to know the full picture of this from any side. And we've seen numerous contradictions over the last year, really, when it came to humanitarian aid. Rafah crossing, it doesn't surprise me it wasn't going to be opened. This is a crossing that it goes to Egypt. This was the crossing where you had the risk of arms rearmament. That's going to be a non-negotiable for the Israelis. The Israelis are going to control that crossing. But that said, if they have to man all the other border crossings, and that is the most important right now, they have to open all the other border crossings, inspect the aid as quickly as possible, and allow it to go in. If you're going to do that, then you need to prioritize which border crossings. And you're not going to prioritize the Egyptian one, sorry, because that's the one that's the riskiest. That's the one that is the most risky or vulnerable to being exploited for arms to be hidden, for other items to be hidden in there. And that's not something that the Israelis are ever going to accept. So I never saw that happening anyway. But I would hope that the Israelis open there are numerous border crossings along the side of Gaza with Israel. And from what we heard, by the way, just at the end of last week, those many border crossings had been opened and a huge influx of aid had gone in. So again, I can understand why certain regions, it would be harder for them because it's harder, given the rubble, to get to them. It's not going to be an easy situation. Again, I don't want to paint a rosy picture for you. But that said, I also would be measured in what you're hearing from every side, because it's probably a mix of the truth is a mix of all of it.
Sure.
But Rafah crossing is risky.
Hagar Chemali, I always appreciate your analysis and expertise. You are the person to go to talk to about it, and I really appreciate you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.